The time has finally arrived. The Prince of Zeresh is to be wed to the nation's great and bitter rival, Princess of Derosa, creating a pact of peace to end a centuries-long war between the two nations. The castle is alive, with servants and guards bustling about in final preparations for the extravagant ceremony. As the royal bannermen take up their positions in the grand hall and guests take their seats, the prince is getting ready in the side chamber. When the servants leave the room, the prince stands in front of the mirror, appraising the wedding attire. As he looks upon his personage in the reflection, he notices the bags under his eyes, and that his face has a pale coloring to it. Do I really look so tired? He thought, as he took a concerned step forward to see better. In that instant, his reflection broke into a terrible grin, reaching out through the mirror and pulling him headfirst through what he now realized was a portal to the abyss. Back in the grand hall, the whole room was waiting impatiently upon the prince. As the time reached to the point of embarrassment, a pair of guardsmen went to check on the prince. Receiving no answer to the knocks, they barged through the door, weapons raised, only to find nothing. As the guards looked around, one noticed a pair of princely shoes in front of the mirror. Looking up, he saw himself staring back, and his reflection smiled in glee. In this Monster Spotlight, we will be taking a closer look at everything you need to know about the Fetch, its lore, its ecology, biology, and history. To find the Fetch, we have to do a little bit of digging. The Fetch appeared in the AD&D 2e Dragonlance Monster Compendium and the 3.5e Dragonlance Campaign Setting. But no worries if you don't play Dragonlance, this creature can be used in any setting. The Fetch actually wasn't something that I knew beforehand. I came upon the Fetch while searching for some of Dungeons & Dragons' most terrifying creatures, and found a Reddit post that had everyone listing some of their favorites. Right at the top was the Fetch, which I found most intriguing. A special thanks to Dungeon Dad's video on the Fetch, and for making a 5e equivalent. I will link that video in the description below. As odd as the name sounds, it is based off the Irish fetch, an ill omen of impending death upon those that see it. Speaking of, did you know that a lot of creatures and elements found in fantasy have been inspired by or taken from world history? Hi everyone, my name is Brett, and welcome to the Fantasy Historian. On this channel, we do monster spotlights from Dungeons & Dragons and their counterparts in history that inspired them, as well as any other interesting connections we can find. If that sounds like your cup of tea, pull up a seat and toss a like and subscribe to The Storyteller if you're willing to do so. Thank you all, and now back to the Fetch. Let's take a look at the Fetch in the Monster section of the Dragonlance Campaign Setting sourcebook. The lore reads, Fetches are harbingers of evil that dwell on the fringes of the abyss. They can only enter Krynn through reflective surfaces, such as mirrors or ponds. Krynn, by the way, is the Dragonlance's home setting, and again, that can be changed to whatever setting you're playing in. In its natural form, a Fetch appears as a featureless shadow, though it is perfectly solid. When hunting, however, the Fetch becomes invisible, appearing only when reflected in a mirror or other reflective surfaces. When seen in this manner, the Fetch takes on the appearance of its intended victim. The Fetch looks like a haggard, pale imitation of its target, with dull and lifeless eyes. A Fetch breaks into a cruel grin when its eyes first meet those of its intended victim. Fetches never speak, though they understand common and abyssal. Like the Sturge that we visited last week, the lore to the fetch is a little underwhelming, but what it's lacking in lore, it definitely makes up in combat. But before we get there, let's take a look at those stats. It is a medium outsider with an alignment of chaotic evil, so probably a monster that likes to kill, or at least enjoys it. High strength, and pretty good intelligence and wisdom. This monster knows how to hunt, and it hits hard, but it is quite slow. It has a low dexterity and a movement speed of 20 instead of the usual 30. Its challenge rating is 6, which finds itself along other creatures like the Chimera, Wyvern, and enemy mages. Even though the lore was a little short, we find out a lot about the fetch through the combat, and there is so much here that I'm very, very excited to check out with you all. Fetches are single-minded in their mission to slay their intended victims and drag their souls to the abyss. A fetch begins its attack by first looking into the material plane from the abyss. The fetch does this by creating a latent portal via a mirror or other reflective surface on the material plane. When it sees a potential victim, it takes on the victim's appearance, which is visible to the victim and only the victim. That's very important. And only the victim when the victim looks into the mirror. If there is more than one possible victim, the fetch targets the nearest opponent or chooses one randomly. This is a helpful tidbit for scenarios that have more than one player looking at the reflection at a time. When the victim meets the fetch's eyes, the fetch locks onto its target. It moves through the portal and attacks. Once on the material plane, the fetch is invisible. It can only be seen in reflection, and even then, only by the victim. The fetch manifests what looks like a mirror image of the victim's own weapon, or attacks unarmed if the victim has no weapon. Regardless of how it appears to be armed, the fetch attacks with its touch attack. Create spawn. If a fetch kills a creature with its energy drain, it picks up the slain creature and retreats back through the mirror portal by which it entered the material plane. If it can successfully bring the slain creature back to the abyss, the creature becomes a fetch in 1d4 days. Killing the fetch or destroying the mirror portal leaves the slain creature on the material plane, where it is merely dead. And here's the touch attack. Energy drain. Living creatures hit by a fetch's incorporeal touch attack gain 2 negative levels. The fortitude save to remove a negative level has a DC of 15. The DC is charisma based. Losing 2 levels per successful attack is insane. And the fetch gets 2 attacks per turn as well, having the potential to lose 4 levels. Now, negative levels was a mechanic up to 3.5e, and then it was dropped. But the gist of the mechanic was that for each negative level, the player would take a -1 penalty to all skill and ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws, lose 5 hit points, a level, and a spell slot of the highest level spell. It's quite the debuff. This debuff could be removed by a spell like Restoration or after a successful saving throw at the end of 24 hours. Here's the catch though. If the player cannot get rid of it, then they permanently lose a level and all bonuses, abilities, and spells, etc. obtained at the higher level are removed. And not only that, but if the player is drained to a negative amount of levels equal to or below their current level, they're instantly slain. Boom, gone. This is really brutal, and what makes the hairs on the back of your neck rise when you face this creature. This isn't just any encounter. This is a fight to save your character from permanent level loss or death. And if that isn't scary enough, fetches also have, as mentioned in the lore, invisibility. Fetches are invisible. A fetch can only be seen by its intended victim, and then only in reflection in a reflective surface. The intended victim can pinpoint the fetch's location if the creature is visible to the victim through a reflective surface, but even then, the fetch has total concealment, 50% miss chance. Well, that's just great. It has total concealment, it's invisible to others, and it hits really hard. Oh man. Since losing levels has been dropped from 5e though, you can have the fetch just hit really hard. I personally like the constant danger, as it's a crucial aspect to what makes the fetch so terrifying. And not only are you growing weaker as the fight progresses, but even in victory, there might be a price that needs to be paid. So depending on what the Dungeon Master wants to do, you can either keep the negative level idea, change it in some way, find other debuffs or something like that that's similar, or just have the fetch hit really hard. Mirror portals. There's going to be a little bit of repeat here. At will, a fetch can create a two-way portal connecting the abyss to a reflective surface on the material plane, such as a mirror or a pool of water. This ability is similar to the gate spell, but only the fetch and any objects it carries can pass through the mirror portal. The reflective surface must be large enough for the fetch to pass through, a minimum of 2.5 feet on a side. The fetch can use the reflective surface even if it is not reflecting anything, for instance, if it is in a dark room. The portal is initially latent. The fetch can see and hear into the material plane through the reflective surface, but it cannot actually pass through. To fully open the portal, a humanoid creature must look into the reflective surface and meet the fetch's gaze. A creature who looks into the reflective surface automatically meets the fetch's gaze unless it specifically avoids looking at the reflection's eyes. If it does avoid the eyes, it has a 50% chance each round of meeting the fetch's gaze as long as it continues to look in the mirror. Once the fetch opens the portal, it can pass through in either direction as a move action. The portal remains open indefinitely, although it only functions for fetches. The fetch can open a new portal if it has access to another suitable reflective surface. For every day that the fetch is prevented from returning to the abyss, it suffers 1d6 points of constitution damage. Alright, so what exactly is a fetch? Well, despite my first thoughts, it is not a spirit or ghost. It's related to the doppelganger. In Irish folklore, it is called the fetch or the double. There is some confusion as to the exact etymology of the name, but it is believed that the fetch appears on a reflective surface to fetch the soul of the viewer, appearing as an exact copy except that it appears as the person will be at the time of death. For example, dripping wet for drowning, wounds from a murder, dying of old age, etc. It was an omen of impending death and not a specific creature that killed. Dungeons & Dragons takes the fetch and then places it in the abyss found in the outer planes. In its homeland, the fetch appears as a 4 to 7 foot or 1.2 to 2.1 meters tall physical shadow. On the prime material plane, it copies its victim, armor and all, but with a haunting appearance with dull, lifeless eyes, as we read in the lore. What's strange, though, is that they neither eat nor drink. Which begs the question, why do they attack people? Under the Create Spawn ability, if it can successfully bring the slain creature back to the abyss, that creature becomes a fetch in 1d4 days. Having once been a living being, its contempt and hatred for those still alive drives it to create portals to the prime material world, reflectively smiling with glee when eyes are locked with the prey. This mirror portal ability, as it's called, has got to be one of my all-time favorites, as it allows for all sorts of situations. Don't get caught up on the mirror aspect. As it says in the ability, it can appear on any reflective surface. Polishing your armor? Taken. Thirsty? While drinking some water, you see your reflection upon the surface of the stream. Gone. What about a more modern setting? Water puddles pooled on the asphalt street, reflecting the lights of neon signs throughout the city at night, are now deadly traps. Buildings with glass windows, clean and wax cars, the list goes on. There's so much you can do with this. If you get rid of the size restrictions on how big the reflective surface has to be for it to fit through, oh boy. Reflection in somebody else's sunglasses? That's too bad. Oh, is that a cell phone you're using with a reflective screen? Potential is staggering. It is such a cool creature. The monster manual mentions that fetches are sometimes employed by evil wizards, clerics, or gods. This is something that the fetch would excel at. Going back to the story I made up in the beginning, the fetch could have been sent by a guest of the kingdom of DeRosa. If he wanted to, he could have killed a lot more than a prince and guard. So imagine this. Once the fetch finished taking out the prince and the guards that came to investigate, now moves on to the royal guards. The guards are looking around, making sure the guests are behaving, and one of them looks to his comrade and sees his reflection in his fellow guardsman's armor. Yes, that's right. The fetch comes for him through the armor. Now perhaps this one puts up a fight. Well, that's alright, because to everyone else, the fetch is invisible. So it looks like the guard has just become a traitor, attacking another guard. Chaos ensues as the guards start fighting each other, and the fetch goes around picking off any stragglers through all the guards' armor. Just imagine it jumping from reflective armor to reflective armor, just taking people out. Now, if you remove the size restrictions, it can be really crazy, but also a lot of fun. So maybe the fetch starts pulling the prince or the princess through the marriage ring, or the king or queen through the crown. Or maybe even it waits until the marriage is over, it's reception time, and all the guests are sitting down and eating their meal. Well, the fetch is going to take high-profile people out through their dinner plates, or their goblets, their utensils. It is, there's so much you can do. It is such a cool creature. And what's also really nice about this, it's a great team testing monster. Since only one player will be able to see the monster throughout the fight, communication will be key. As the battle continues to draw out, the unfortunate player is slowly growing weaker and weaker, so it's a race against time as well. If the fetch is changed to hitting really hard instead, you can still have it grab an unconscious player and then return back to the abyss. So you still have some kind of time element to it as well. So the fetch is invisible to everyone else but the victim. And even then it has some kind of concealment. It can portal through reflective surfaces. It can hit really hard or make you lose levels. What CR is this again? 6? Well, that's probably why there are size restrictions to the fetch and what it can go through. As a weakness that can be exploited. Somehow reducing or destroying the size of the reflective area will stop it from coming through. There are no rules for water surfaces that I could find, so it'll be up to the dungeon master and the group. Perhaps just breaking the surface of the water would be effective, or trapping your reflective image in a small vessel. Maybe it's just that one little spot that you see your reflection in the water, rather than the whole surface of this body of water. Once the portal has been destroyed, the fetch now has to find another reflective surface to portal back home. And there seems to be no need for a victim to lock eyes with to make the return home portal an actual portal that it can go through. Coordinated spells and tactics is the most effective way at killing a fetch, as well as any abilities or spells that reveal invisibility. The mimicry of a doppelganger is one of its greatest strengths, but also one of its greatest weaknesses, as who knows yourself better than you? I want to leave off with another idea with the fetch. Get rid of the Abyss homeland and the chaotic evil alignment, and the fetch becomes a transporter, an everyday means of travel for anyone able to summon them. It can also be an out-of-the-box idea to pull players from a modern setting into the world of fantasy, or vice versa. Alright, that's all I got for this one. I had a lot of fun with this creature, and I hope you do as well. I would love to hear any stories that anyone has of using the fetch in their own games in the comments below, and I'll see you all in the next one.